Welcome to the Soul Connect podcast, where Katyayani and Layla discuss all things spiritual, emotional, and beyond to provide you with some guidance and insights to help you on your life's path. Today, we are doing episode 2, and Katyayani today got to choose the topic that we are going to be discussing, which I think you're going to find quite interesting. So, Katyayani, why don't you tell our audience today what it is that you wanted to chat about?
I wanted to chat today about sacrifices and actually find out from talk about it in terms of whether people have an understanding of what they do when they're actually sacrificing. Coming from obviously an Indian Hindu background, a lot of people that I've known about, family included, that have done sacrifices over time for the various gods. Now, this is something that I can't understand because I don't understand how people can actually do sacrifices in terms of for the light, because the light never ever asks for blood or for any kind of sacrifices. And it's it's such a it is a little bit of a difficult topic to get into because you have to understand the cultural backgrounds that sacrifices come from. Like when you go into the Native American sacrificing, it's not really sacrificing. They ask permission from the animal that they actually slaughtering because they use it for food. They do not use it as an offering to the gods. Now, when I look at blood rituals, and this kind of goes back way back in terms of a lot of curses, a lot of kind of negative things that we experience in our lives. And this has come through from various different people I've spoken to in terms of curses. And curses go way back into our ancestral lines. And a lot of them have happened because of obviously sacrifices done with blood. And on the physical plane, blood is one of the most important, most powerful commodities, if I can put it in that way, because it is life force energy that flows through us. And when we actually do sacrifices through blood, to actually uncreate that, we've got to give back blood. So it's a topic that I actually would like to understand because I had a conversation with somebody that um, has been doing sacrifices but is hugely ill. And I just needed to understand what the sacrifice was being done for. And unfortunately, the spirit didn't understand what he was doing. He was just following essentially from what his family members, from grandparents that got carried on over generations. So it's a blind following with absolutely no understanding. And if you don't understand what you're actually doing, why are you doing it? Because for me, I look at it as opening up portals to dark entities. And as you know, both of us have done tons of clearings in terms of dark force entities, earthbound spirits, and with these sacrifices, are people not opening up spaces for dark entities to come through? And how does it then affect the family, the person that's doing the sacrifice, as well as everybody in that environment and in that society?
Jeez, this is some really dark stuff that we're going into today, hey? I mean, sacrificing. I was like, okay, it's not just sacrificing ourselves, for like a greater good or something like that, sacrificing or compromising ourselves. But this is like actually murdering another living being. And it takes us back to the question, like, firstly, do people still do sacrifices these days? I mean, if we think back to like the media and that, we've been exposed to sacrifices more in the media and in movies and that, but it's more linked to like Satanism, right? Sacrificing a child or, slaughtering an animal and doing blood sacrifices and rituals. But this stuff is really deep and dark. Katyayani, tell our audience, why why do people still do sacrifices these days? And what sort of like religions or beliefs, would people still be doing this kind of thing these days? I mean, I've heard of offerings, right? Like in the forest where you take, platters of fruit, or you do offerings of myrrh and frankincense, or, even beautiful, sparkly gifts in it for like the fairy realm. But an offering and a sacrifice is quite different in terms of its energy, right?
Well, when you do sacrificing, and this is kind of giving something to get something, and you know what that means, you know, in terms of the light, when you and I delve into the light, when you and I increase our vibrations or deal with the stuff that we're going through, we are not taking a life so that our life can be spared, or the life of a child can be spared. And what tends to happen is that people assume that when they give a life, they're saving a life. And I think is it's an understanding that the people of now do not have, because if I have to think about giving blood, um, and I mean I've asked the question, do the gods, do our ancestors, does anything of the light require us to give blood to it in any form or another? I do understand we eat meat, so that's animals are being killed for us to consume. But when you are actually offering blood, because it's not just about the meat, it's about the blood. Because at the end of the day, when you look at when you slaughter an animal, the blood falls to the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people tend to drink the blood as well as an offering to the goddess Kali. Now, I've had, um, my lessons where Hinduism is concerned, and it's completely different from what people are actually doing. I think the teachings on some levels, and I'm going to speak mostly on Hinduism because it's where I understand it. There are other other cultures that actually do sacrifices as well. But
Mm-hmm.
we'll speak about that, in our maybe in the next podcast, because I need to speak to a few people in that cultural background to get more of an understanding. Um, and what actually happens is you actually open up spaces for negativity, for dark force entities, for illnesses to actually come through.
Yeah.
So the misconception of the offering to Kali, for one, is an understanding of a story that people follow misguidedly.
Mm.
And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a explanation about what had happened with Kali and why she is seen in this kind of way. So in the story of Kali, she was actually called to put to take over a demon because he was causing havoc on the planet. And she was the only one that could actually slay this demon. When her energies were called upon, and Kali is a combination of various different deities, and that's how she comes into the fierce form. And in this fierce form, she then can get rid of darkness, get rid of chaos, get rid of anything that's obviously negative. So, in slaying the demon, she found that every time his blood touched the ground, there was another form of him that came up. So, every drop that touched the ground, there was just more of this demon popping up all over the place. And for this not to happen, she had to contain the blood. So she couldn't allow it to fall to the ground. And what she did was she ingested it and she took that blood into herself so that it didn't drop to the ground and more of him formed. In doing so as well, because obviously it was a demon, she kind of went into absolute rage. And the god Shiva then had to lay himself down for her energies to calm down. And if you're to look at the necklace around her neck, it's got a whole load of skulls, and that's the many times that she had to slay this one demon. So if we look at that story in terms of why she ingested blood, she didn't ingest the blood because she wanted the blood. She ingested the blood to contain something that would have caused havoc on the planet. So in terms of when people now do a sacrifice for Kali, it is not required, not in the least. So when I look at it on those levels, I actually don't see it as doing something for a light being, but actually sacrificing to allow darkness into your spaces. Because I don't, I mean, from everything I understand within myself, from all of the spaces that I've gone through, you should not be sacrificing a life or shedding blood for any kind of God, because the light doesn't ask for blood.
Hmm.
So in that spaces, I just feel that all of the people that are actually doing these sacrifices are actually opening up portals to darkness. They're allowing dark beings to come through. They're allowing dark beings to take over themselves as well. Um, and a lot of people talk about having gods come through their energy field, but these are people that are hugely abusive, have terrible illnesses. Their bodies are hugely sick. So if there's a presence of God, if there's a presence of light, why are all the negative things happening in somebody's life if
Hmm.
they are bringing through the essence of a particular God or a particular light? I don't like talking about God because essentially everything we talk about in terms of the higher energies, it's essences of who we are in terms of on the spirit plane and in the universe.
Yeah. It seems like people are very misguided and have gotten their stories a bit warped because, yeah, like you say, sacrificing anything to please a god, to seek favor, definitely seems a bit warped and twisted. And it's not the sort of realm that we're delving into. Through a lot of like the media and the stories that have been portrayed, most of the times when there has been a sacrifice, it's been to prove their commitment and their dedication to that god or goddess, and also to seek and gain power. There have been movies where a king, in order to, harness more power to um, fulfill his dreams and desires, he's been asked to sacrifice like a child or a loved one to prove his commitment.
Yeah.
And we know that the creator source of all that is wouldn't demand that from us. So there's definitely a warped vision and view of what true spirituality is. And I agree. I mean, that's life force energy, and it creates a negative
Mm.
portal and a reverse polarity, which just brings in so much negativity. And it ties right into this, debt society where, it's an eye for an eye. I've given to you, therefore you owe me back. And all of creation is always seeking to expand and grow. But this just creates a whole negative energy. And, if people are sick and they are being guided to slaughter an animal and sacrifice it in order to gain health, you know that the vibration is already on a negative footing there. So what should people still be doing sacrifices, and how do they overcome this negative energy to rather get it back on a more lighter note?
You know, this is where I fault the teachings, the teachings of our parents, our grandparents, all of those kind of things, because it's blind faith. It's blindly doing things that you have no understanding about. And then when the negative things start to happen, then you wonder why. I've done this prayer and I've done that sacrifice and nothing's working. But the thing is that you have no understanding of your own spirit. And um, it's unfortunately it's not something that we can eradicate in the near future, because there are a lot of people that are really, really entrenched in this kind of worship in this kind of prayer. And I think that's where the problems tend to come in, is because we, as Hindus, there's more a worshipping of of gods rather than an understanding of the essence of what that God is all about. And there are aspects of who we are. So when you speak about Shiva, or you speak about Kali, or you speak about Lakshmi or Vishnu, the essence of who we are. And we as a lot of people in terms of Hindus do not see it like that, because it's an outside worship rather than an inside worship. And if a lot of people can understand it on a level of, I have to worship within myself the Kali, or I have to worship within myself the Lakshmi or the Shiva or the Krishna. You are actually worshiping, and you are actually bringing into yourself that high vibration frequency of that God or goddess. By doing a sacrifice, you actually attaining absolutely nothing. If anything, you're causing uh, huge problems for yourself, because when darkness takes, it doesn't give you in terms of how you expect it to give you back. It takes a lot away from you. Your body gets sick. There's tons of things that will happen. And the more you actually do the sacrifices, the more you're going to be asked for it. And, and I mean, there are people that get trances as well. And that's just another kind of topic to understand, where um, people assume that they have the energy of God that enters their being, and it feels hugely powerful. But these hugely powerful beings cannot come off the light, because if you had to be in the presence of God, you'd be in awe. If you had to be in the presence of the divine, you would feel something completely different run through your entire body. These people that go into trances, most of us get scared of them, because it's fierce, ugly energy. And a lot of people might get upset about this, but it's about time that we actually started realizing what we are doing, that faith shouldn't be followed blindly, because when you follow it blindly and have no understanding of what you do, you're actually creating more problems than you're creating a better life for yourself or for anybody else.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask the question as well, why do you think it is that people still worship gods, so to speak? I mean, we talk about source creator, the creator of all that is, and yet there definitely seems to be so many beliefs and religions that still honor or worship lesser gods. Like taking Hinduism, for example. Like I know, going into people's spaces and having to clear negative energy from there, people that specifically do offerings or sacrifices to the Hindu gods, it seems like their entire homes are just filled with this horrible black yucky goo. And it's something that I could never understand. And I would love to hear from your perspective why you think it is that people still worship gods when, we know that these are gods that also have their own God or creator. And do these gods really have such an influence in our human lives?
Well, in terms of, if you had to go into the ancient teachings of Hinduism, is very, very different from what is actually being taught right now, or what people understand right now. So it's essentially just, getting people to do things without having an understanding behind them. When you look at some of the literature that's written about Hinduism, and I'm going to take the Bhagavad Gita for one, which is essentially a battle. It's set on a battlefield with Krishna and Arjuna, and Arjuna, being a devotee of Krishna, is on this battlefield. But a lot of people don't understand it, that it's not actually a battlefield where he is now having to fight his family and friends. It's his mind. It's what is going on inside myself that I need to kill off. And there's, it's a deep understanding that a lot of people don't get, because they assume that it is a battleground and not essentially the battle within self. So the problem is that the teachings have not come down in the right way. um, Nobody understands what the teachings are all about, and because it's looked so complicated, a lot of them just went ahead and did things as usual, as their mothers did, as their fathers did, without questioning, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? And essentially, when you have no understanding and you are blindly following, then you have no clue of whether you are attracting light energy or whether you are opening yourself to dark energy. And so, what you found with going into these homes was that these people that were obviously doing the sacrifices and stuff like that, that black, icky energy was them opening their homes, themselves, and their environments to dark energy. And dark energy thrives on a lot of stuff. So, a lot of people are also afraid of not doing things because if I don't do it, then what happens? You know, so
Yeah.
it's also the fear that comes through, about, if I don't do it, something bad's going to happen, rather than being able to step away from it and ask the question, is this the right thing for me to do? So the unfortunate thing is that religion, and although I don't look at Hinduism as a religion, but as a way of life and as a teaching, I blame a lot of the teachers that have come before us that have not given us the right things to understand. And if we haven't had the proper teachings in these fields, then everybody's just doing as they assume that they should do. And this happens in other cultures, in other religions as well. You are separated from a God energy. So you assume that when you are worshiping, you are actually bringing that God energy to you, but you are not. When you are worshiping, you are actually not reaching to those places that you actually want to reach, because none of it is outside of yourself. Everything is inside of yourself. Um, when I left Hinduism, because there was a point where I couldn't understand what Hinduism was all about because it was just too complicated for me. And I gave everything away. I took off with the various different beings. And Kali was the first one that came back. She came back and she said, now you are ready to understand. And the teachings she gave me was that all the 108 gods and goddesses that we find in Hinduism isn't actually a god that is something to worship. It is an aspect of who we are. And if you have to look at Shiva, he's a masculine energy. So when you are looking at the Shiva within yourself, you are looking at the masculine side of who you are. When you bring in Lakshmi, you are bringing in that creative side of who you are, because Lakshmi is a goddess of wealth. So to bring in wealth, you bring in that energy, which then helps you create so that you can actually then start manifesting the wealth and the abundance. And this goes on with all the other goddesses. You look at Saraswati. Saraswati is the goddess of wisdom. So when you are actually bringing that essence of Saraswati within yourself, you are then connecting yourself to wisdom. So each of it has a specific archetype, a specific energy that it brings to you. And it was separated in that way long ago so that people can understand the various sides of themselves. And it was about bringing that energy within themselves and actually acknowledging it as part of who we are. But unfortunately, it just goes on the outside. And once you start worshiping and praying on the outside as if something is not of you, then you are actually then limiting your entire being from the greatness that of what you are. And when you start doing that, you deplete your own energies. And once you start depleting your own energies, you open yourself up to a lot of dark stuff.
Absolutely. Well, that makes sense. Different aspects of who we are out there in spiritual form. We talk about a higher self, and we know that that's ourselves, but in a higher vibrational version and energy, because all that we are cannot be contained or come through in this physical body and reality. Otherwise, we would simply explode, right, with vibration and frequency. And the whole purpose of this life, just like in the Kabbalistic teachings, not that I follow it anymore, but it is very much about know thyself. I no longer sort of connect with spirit guides and angels. I prefer to rather go direct to source through the connection of my higher self. And I know that my higher self has never asked me to worship or to, do any sacrifices. And the only kind of blood rituals I have ever been drawn to is more around things like my moon time or my menstrual cycle. And it's using my own blood as a beautiful, creative, source energy that then gets mixed with water and used in the garden, for example. But anything related to blood rituals, I think people need to tread really carefully. And I guess at the end of the day, the message really is, be careful and question everything, because just because our elders or our religious leaders or even our politicians say that something is right, if it doesn't feel right and it's not bringing you closer to love and centeredness and feeling empowered, you need to question it. Don't follow blindly, because then you just like a sheeple, and then you have no say in how your life plays out, and you're not going to find yourself getting any closer to feeling love, connectedness, and joy. Do you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm,
And anybody looking at curses that they might be feeling that's essentially part of their lives need to go back in terms of what has your family line been doing in terms of blood rituals that is now affecting um, the offspring of the current time. And that's happening quite a lot. So, in terms of just having a look at that and understanding that if there's any darkness in your spaces and any darkness that's kind of happening in your spaces, major illnesses that you have no understanding of as well, look at what's been done over time. Blood rituals are hugely powerful, and they can bind things for eons of years. And if you are not open enough to your own understanding, um, it can actually take over your lives. So you've got to understand from where you come from, and you've got to take guidance from essentially your higher self at all times.
absolutely. And one of the things that you and I recently experienced is even just being connected or helping, or counseling somebody who is actually involved with these kind of rituals, how it actually affects us as well. People in
Yep.
relationships, for
Yep.
example, and not knowing the history of their partner can affect them too. And because we share
Yes.
DNA, even when we're having like sexual intercourse with somebody, there is definitely interaction on a DNA level, which means that you can connect to that person's lineage as well and be affected. So
Absolutely.
in closing off today, let's talk a little bit about how one can now start to clear these kind of energies, because we talk about clearing curses and spells and things like that. But I mean, if you have inadvertently been involved with somebody, or your family has been involved with doing these kind of sacrifices or blood rituals, how can one clear themselves of these kind of energies so that they can get back on the path to light and connection with one's true self and higher consciousness?
Well, just want to share something that happened recently, and I've had to deal with having a curse from an ex-partner, from his ex-wife, and I had to actually um, do the breaking of that entire thing because I was with him for a period of time. And because, as you said, in terms of the intimate relationship, it did affect me, not in terms of taking over my life, but actually destroying a lot of the things in that relationship. And a lot of it came through prophetic dreams for me, which I had to then sever with my own blood so that I could break that tie, because him and myself also had a blood tie, and I had to break those ties. Um, it is something that, if somebody is actually going through, I can give you more of a personal one-on-one in terms of how we go about doing that. I don't think that, to actually share it on this podcast, but, just to say, if somebody has experienced something like that and is experiencing something like that, just they need to contact us, or they need to contact me in terms of, okay, what is it that you're experiencing, and how can we then work through it, because each one is going to also be very, very different. So it's about going into those spaces and actually understanding it a little bit so that you can actually put an end to it. I've had to do it, so I actually used my menstrual blood, and I wrote an entire letter of release so that I could be released from those ties. And that worked like a dream. It was amazing. And it just went back to the times where I used to be a medicine woman and doing all of these things, and bringing through that understanding from what I did before to the here and now, because I was experiencing that. Um, and then on the other hand, it's when we have people that are doing sacrifices, and they are opened to a lot of things that can then enter their spaces. When they interact with other humans, it does drain your energy. So you and I both have experienced it in the last week. And I'm glad I caught it when I caught it, in terms of the person that was actually did do a sacrifice in recent time, and the fact that we both were affected energetically with that, because we didn't actually have the know that this person was actually doing this kind of blood ritual.
Definitely. And as you know, I don't like to deal with these kind of energies anymore. I find it just lowers my vibration, and it's a very, very heavy energy. But at the end of the day, one of the big things that everybody needs to come to terms with is that they probably got involved without proper knowledge and experience. So the very first step you need to do is turn inward and actually forgive yourself. Because remember, the darkness likes to make ourselves turn on ourselves. In other words, from within ourselves, it creates doubt and disconnection and drama. And you need to have a strong will. And that's only going to start when at first you can learn to forgive yourself for what has happened and look deep within yourself to find your real truth. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe that humans are bad and evil. I believe we are all inherently good, and we all strive for love and connection and happiness. And with all the chaos and drama that is happening in this world, we are taught and we are conditioned to always look outside of ourselves for that kind of power and guidance, when actually we should be turning inward. So be gentle with yourselves, accept what is, start the process of forgiving yourself, and then reach out to people that you know that you can trust, who will have your back and be able to guide you through this healing process, so that you can release all of these horrible shackles and negative energy tied to these blood sacrifices and rituals, and worshiping the darker version of any of these gods and spirit guides and beings that are out there. Okay. Good. All right. So Katyayani's details are in the description of this podcast, should you wish to reach out to her. And of course, you'll have my details there as well. Thank you so much for listening in today. And thank you, Katyayani, for sharing your wonderful insights and this educational background into the Hindu religion and beliefs. I certainly learned a few things about some of the gods there. And as always, it's lovely connecting with you.
Thanks, sis. I'm hugely grateful for having you in this space with me. And thank you very much. Thank you for listening, understanding, and for us putting this out. I think it's extremely important.
Fantastic. And we want to invite all of our audience and viewers, if you have anything that you would like us to discuss on future podcasts, do feel free to send in your questions. On Thursdays, we aim to have a couple of our viewers or audience members actually join us as we answer some of their questions and issues that they have in their life, because we find that these issues or questions are probably something that everyone can relate to. So look out for our next podcast. Share with those that you feel would benefit. And don't forget to tune in again next week. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.